Today, we're diving into a legal mystery where a simple delivery just disappeared. This one small event sparked a legal battle that went all the way to the top. This is the case of the lost cargo. Everything in this story revolves around this number, 156,404 pesos. That's how much the missing cargo was worth. 400 sacks of soybean meal that just vanished, kicking off a huge legal fight. And that really brings us to the core question here. When a shipment just goes missing, who's left holding the bill? Is it the owner of the goods, or is it the person hired to move them? Okay, so let's start at the beginning with this vanishing delivery. We need to get to know the players, what they agreed to, and how a totally routine job went so completely wrong. So, on one side, you have Rodolfo Cipriano's company, CIP Trade. They hired Estrelita Bascos, who runs Bascos Trucking. The deal seemed easy enough. Just move 400 sacks of soybean meal from Manila down to Laguna. Simple, right? Well, the problem was it never got there. So when Cipriano asked for his money back, Bascos refused. And this is where we get her first big defense, where she tries to completely redefine what their deal was all about. And here's the clash. Bascos claimed, hey, this was just a simple lease. You just rented my truck. But the court took one look at that and said, nope, this was a contract of carriage. And as you're about to see, that single distinction, it changes everything. So why does that matter so much? Because a contract of carriage involves what the law calls a common carrier. And a common carrier is basically anyone who's in the business of moving goods for other people for a fee. The court's logic here was pretty solid. I mean, Bascos herself admitted she was in the trucking business. The driver and the helper, they were her employees. That means she had control over the cargo the entire time, not the client. It was pretty clear-cut. And the court really slammed the door on this argument with this powerful quote from its decision. It basically says, look, it doesn't matter what you call your agreement. The law is going to look at what it actually is. Reality trumps labels. Okay, so the court has established that Bascos was a common carrier, but she had another defense ready to go. She claimed the truck was hijacked. She argued this was a force majeure, a totally uncontrollable event that should get her off the hook completely. This is where the standard of care becomes so important. You see, the law doesn't just ask common carriers to be careful. It demands they use extraordinary diligence. We're talking about the highest possible degree of care in protecting the goods they're carrying. It's an incredibly high bar to clear. And because of that super high standard, the law has this built-in rule, the presumption of negligence. If goods are lost, the law just automatically assumes the carrier was at fault. The whole script is flipped. It's not up to the owner to prove negligence, it's up to the carrier to prove they did everything right. So that brings us to the next big question for Bascos. Can a hijacking actually beat this presumption of negligence? Is it a legally valid excuse? Well, the law is very specific here. The answer is yes, a robbery can be a valid defense, but, and this is a huge but, only if the carrier can prove it was done with grave or irresistible threat, violence, or force. Just saying we got robbed is nowhere near enough. So what kind of proof did Bascos bring to meet this really high standard? Well, she presented three things: her own affidavit, another one from a relative who didn't even see what happened, and an affidavit from the truck helper. And the court was, well, they weren't convinced. They called her statement self-serving. And more importantly, they pointed out that an affidavit from the helper is pretty weak. Why not bring the helper himself to testify in court, where he could be questioned? This was just not the best evidence you could get. So, with both of her big defenses falling flat, we finally arrive at the court's final verdict. And there it is. The Supreme Court agreed with the lower courts. Estrelita Bascos and her trucking company were found liable for the full value of the lost soybean meal, that $156,404.00 plus interest. This visual really sums up why she lost. You have the immense weight of that legal presumption of negligence on one side, and on the other, you have her evidence, which just wasn't strong enough to tip the scales back in her favor. She just couldn't meet her burden of proof. And that right there is the key legal takeaway. Because Bascos couldn't provide strong, credible evidence to prove her case, that initial assumption that she was negligent became a conclusive, undeniable fact in the eyes of the law. So, okay, beyond this one story between two businesses, what are the big lessons here? Why does a case from decades ago still matter to us today? Well, this case really hammers home 4 huge lessons. First, if you're a common carrier, the law holds you to the highest possible standard of care. Second, the reality of your deal is what matters, not what you decide to call it. Third, if goods disappear on your watch, the law assumes you're at fault until you can prove otherwise. And finally, if you're going to claim some unavoidable event, you better have some really strong evidence to back it up. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. This legal framework is clearly designed to protect the public, to make sure people can trust others with their property. But you have to ask, does it put too heavy a burden on the carriers themselves? It's a fascinating debate about balancing risk, responsibility, and the public's trust.